Imagine a talented leader who was fired for openly pointing out a mistake to their boss, or a gifted student who was isolated from classmates due to their constant correct answers. These individuals did not fail due to a lack of intelligence. They lost because they displayed it too openly. The truth can be uncomfortable, and the world rewards not those who know more, but those who can use their knowledge at the right time and in the right way. Have you noticed how often very intelligent people find themselves in trouble? This is not a coincidence. In many fields, especially professional ones, high intelligence is perceived not as an asset, but as a threat. A study from Cornell University showed that people with high intelligence find it more challenging to build lasting social connections, not because of a lack of social skills, but because their observations, no matter how logical, often make others uncomfortable. Their brilliance automatically sets them apart from the group. Consider Alan Turing, the mathematician who helped end World War II by deciphering Nazi codes. Even after saving millions of lives, he was persecuted, humiliated, and removed from the system that was supposed to protect him. His genius was too great for others to comprehend, and he paid dearly for it. Or just look around. A colleague who accurately points out a mistake may seem annoying to others. A student who asks questions of the teacher is perceived as troublesome rather than curious. In such situations, it is not a lack of tact that irritates, but excessive clarity. Intelligence does not provide protection, it exposes. When you see what others do not, you risk being misunderstood. The social instinct often revolves around acceptance versus rejection. This brings us to the main point. Being smart is not enough. You need to know how to use your intelligence in a way that does not alarm those around you. The first step is to understand what reaction your intelligence provokes. Many believe that if they present the truth clearly and logically, it will be accepted. But reality is different. Being right does not mean winning. Often, persistence in this regard leads to failure. Imagine a team meeting. You notice a serious mistake in the strategy. Raise your hand, point out the flaw, and suggest a better solution. On paper, you have helped the group, but in reality, you have become a source of irritation. No one likes to be corrected in front of others. The instinct for self-preservation overrides logic. A study published in Harvard Business Review shows that in the workplace, people who frequently correct others are perceived as less pleasant, even if they are right. It is not about your logic, but about how others feel in its presence. This does not only happen at work. In conversations with friends, if someone makes a mistake and you correct them, the atmosphere shifts. The person withdraws. The conversation stalls. An attempt to contribute can unexpectedly turn into a threat to someone else's ego. This is the main mistake. Relying on what exists and on its own being convincing, we forget that most people respond not to information, but to the emotions it evokes. If the truth you wish to convey humiliates, puts someone in an awkward position, or presents them in an unfavorable light, it will not be heard and is likely to be rejected. Understanding this changes everything. The question is no longer how to prove your point, but whether it is worth saying it now, and how to lead the person to the right conclusions themselves. This is where strategic and emotional intelligence begins. When you appear harmless, people relax and lower their defenses. In such a state, they become more open to both you and your ideas. This does not mean that you should pretend to be weak or incompetent. It means that it is important to choose the right moment to demonstrate your strength. Great strategists have always understood this. A classic example, Leonardo da Vinci. While he was considered merely an artist, he secretly studied engineering, anatomy, and military affairs. When his ideas became known, no one was prepared for them, and their impact was much stronger. Another example is experienced diplomats. They rarely impose themselves, listen more than they speak, and never appear threatening. Yet they are the ones behind the scenes determining the course of negotiations. This happens because those around them do not feel the need to defend themselves against someone who does not appear to be a competitor. A study from Stanford University showed that specialists who are perceived as cooperative and non-competitive gain greater access to confidential information within companies. Why? Because they inspire trust. They are seen as allies rather than rivals. The essence is that appearing harmless does not diminish your value. On the contrary, it gives you the freedom to observe, learn, take the right position, and act when it truly matters. You do not provoke envy, do not activate defensive mechanisms, do not become a target, and when you decide to act, no one expects it. Pretending to be ignorant is not deceit. It is a way to give the other person space for discovery, because when an idea seems to come from them, resistance disappears. This is especially useful in delicate conversations, for example, when you need to convince someone and change their opinion. Instead of saying, "This is wrong, this is right," try asking, "Have you considered this possibility?" Or, "What do you think about this option?" The change is subtle, but the effect is enormous. This technique is used in high-level negotiations. Good mediators do not impose solutions. They ask questions, guiding the conversation partner to arrive at the answer themselves. And when a decision is made, everyone wins, especially the one who managed to steer the conversation. A vivid example is clinical psychology. Experienced therapists avoid telling patients what to do. Instead, they ask questions that help the patient come to their own conclusions. This fosters a personal commitment to change, as the decision feels like one's own. In the business realm, Steve Jobs was a true master of this. In meetings, he sowed doubt, allowing the team to discuss and observe, and in the end, everyone believed that the decision was collective. However, he was the one who initially planted the idea. Such an approach requires control. Often you know the answer, but you must resist the urge to voice it immediately. Instead, you observe, guide, and do not prove anything. And when another person arrives at the right conclusion on their own, they feel respected, and you gain real influence without resorting to pressure. Mediocrity does not walk alone. It seeks support within a group. This is one of the main obstacles for those who think differently or strive for better. In environments where the level is set by the majority, anyone who stands out becomes a threat, not due to their mistakes, but because of what they do right. When excellence exposes others' passivity, the group usually unites, not to grow together, but to maintain a shared comfort. This dynamic is evident in companies, schools, and even families. An employee who performs better than expected often finds themselves isolated, while a student who tries harder than others becomes the target of ridicule. Worst of all, this system often goes unnoticed. It manifests not in direct criticism, but in false smiles, subtle jabs, and exclusions disguised as informality. A study from the University of Sussex showed that in groups with average performance, participants attempting to raise the bar are perceived as destabilizing or selfish, even when their intentions are clearly constructive. On an unconscious level, the group prefers to maintain equilibrium rather than face the changes that growth demands. This does not mean that one should hide or settle for less than they are capable of, but it does mean that how you demonstrate your value is important. If you lay everything out at once, it may trigger a defensive reaction and close doors. However, if you use your intellect wisely, moderating your presence and results, you can open pathways without resistance. Constant visibility may seem like a sign of significance, but in reality, those who are always in the spotlight become targets. Strategic invisibility is the art of observing, understanding the situation, and acting precisely without unnecessary publicity. In nature, the most effective predators are not those who make noise, but those who can camouflage, wait, and strike at the right moment. This logic applies in real life as well. People who stand out due to their intelligence often put themselves at risk if they become predictable or draw attention too soon. A specific example: in corporate negotiations, leaders who speak less but observe more typically make more effective decisions. A study published in the Journal of Organizational Behavior showed that leaders with more restrained behavior achieve greater success in complex negotiations. That is precisely why, by acting with calculated caution and not putting yourself on display, you can achieve more. Strategic invisibility is not passivity, but a conscious choice. You do not remain on the sidelines. Instead, you observe the situation closely, waiting for the right moment to act. While some try to attract attention, you accumulate your advantage. People who master this art understand that there is no need to participate in every conversation. They engage when it truly matters. And when they speak, every word carries weight. This is not due to beautiful phrases, but because it is said at the right time and to the point. That is when perception changes. You cease to be just one of many and become someone who is listened to attentively. But this is only possible if you understand how to shape what others see. How you are perceived is often more important than your true self. This may seem unfair, but that is how the world works. People do not react to your essence, but to the image you create. If you appear confident, you will be respected even in silence. However, if you speak with uncertainty, even with competence, you may easily be overlooked. Perception shapes the behavior of those around you, and that is why it must be handled wisely. An example is a job interview. Many studies show that candidates whose visual and nonverbal signals align with the desired position, such as an upright posture, confident gaze, and controlled voice, have a greater chance of success, even if others have stronger resumes. It is not about appearance, but about the ability to understand the context. Another example is in a corporate environment. A person who speaks little but confidently is perceived as more reliable than someone who constantly seeks to prove their worth. This is the difference between someone who appears prepared and someone who craves approval. Managing perception does not mean being false. It is about understanding what the situation demands and taking strategic action. In negotiations, you can appear flexible to expand possibilities and show firmness when it is truly necessary. In presentations, you can start simply and gradually build the impact, surprising at the end. The advantage lies in being unpredictable yet consistent. It is not about creating an image, but about adapting your delivery based on the environment and goals. Manipulation is a harsh word, but here it refers to subtle influence, the ability to guide decisions without direct pressure. This is one of the most advanced forms of social intelligence, and the best strategies apply it precisely. The idea is simple. When you try to persuade directly, you provoke resistance. A person feels pressure, and their ego takes a defensive position. But if you sow doubts by asking the right questions and offering options that lead to your goal, the decision feels like their own, and thus it is accepted with less resistance. A simple example. In sales, experienced sellers do not say, "Buy this," but rather ask, "What would suit you best?" The extended version or the basic one. The choice is already within the framework of the purchase. Such manipulation is subtle and gently guides. Another example, political negotiations. Leaders who know how to influence without pressure retain more allies and face less resistance. They do not command, but rather propose. They create conditions where the desired solution seems to be the only possible one, even if the final word remains with someone else. The ability to ask the right questions is an important quality of good leaders. Instead of saying, "Do it this way," they ask, "How do you think this can be solved more effectively?" This approach gives team members a sense of participation, and the team feels like part of the solution. The result is higher engagement and less resistance. An interesting fact: according to a study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology, leaders who use so-called indirect influence have 31% more chances of gaining voluntary cooperation from their team than those who issue commands. Such a subtle approach requires patience, the ability to read the context, and mastery of language. But when applied correctly, it significantly increases the ability to achieve results with less effort. Knowing what to say is important, but knowing when to say it and when to remain silent is even more crucial. This defines true strategic intelligence. Many harm themselves not by what they think, but by the desire to take a position. In debates, meetings, and social networks, they speak unnecessarily. They explain themselves when no one has asked. They react when they could simply observe. A typical example is in a corporate environment. An employee is asked about a task that is not yet completed, and in a hurry, they start to justify themselves. In an attempt to defend themselves, they demonstrate uncertainty. A more experienced colleague in the same situation calmly responds, "I will inform you when it is ready," without tension and unnecessary explanations. This is the difference between acting on impulse and acting by choice. Research from the University of Chicago has shown that people who take short pauses before answering difficult questions are perceived as more confident and competent. A well-timed pause indicates control. It creates space and often carries more weight than any arguments. However, there is also a downside. There are moments when silence becomes a mistake. There are situations where a timely, firm stance prevents future misunderstandings. A leader who remains silent in the face of injustice loses authority. An employee who never stands up for their ideas loses significance. The key lies in observing the situation, in the ability to recognize moments and assess consequences. It is not just about whether to speak or remain silent, but about what the situation demands to maintain an advantage. Sometimes the best move is silence. At other times, it is clear and precise action that closes the topic without unnecessary tension. When such perception becomes natural, you gain real control over interactions because there is nothing superfluous or hasty. Everything is measured at the right moment. Being untouchable does not mean isolating oneself. It means not reacting to everything, not losing balance due to any criticism, and not getting involved in every fight. It is a skill, an art of maintaining control even when everything around tries to throw you off balance. Truly strategic thinkers do not constantly justify themselves and do not respond to minor provocations. They understand that the more you react, the more predictable you become. And when you are predictable, you are easy to manipulate. Take, for example, Nelson Mandela. Years of imprisonment, pressure, trials, and provocations did not shake his calmness and clarity of purpose. When he was released, he did not seek revenge. He acted strategically. That is why he became one of the most respected leaders in history. His untouchability was not about distance, but about the fact that nothing could divert him from his path. In everyday life, this manifests in simple decisions. Not arguing over trifles, not seeking approval in every phrase, and not living in a constant defensive mode. When you stop reacting to every opinion, you conserve energy and focus on what truly matters. According to a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, individuals who demonstrate emotional self-control are perceived as more reliable and competent in both social and professional environments. This is not about coldness, it is about stability. Achieving such a state is not easy, but it is possible. It requires awareness of your triggers, clear intention, and control over your own time. It is a transition from a reactive mode to a strategic one.